while, we would start the event. Just to check that all our panelists have access to turn their video on and their mics on, and when they are ready to speak, and that the setting and everything is right. I can see Ben, I see Dr. Chimesi, and I saw Mr. Akolache. At some point he went off. So if you are a panelist and you have access to the functions, please turn on your video. I think that it's just appropriate that we start now and to respect time. It's just 2 minutes past the hour. And so I would go straight to the program. So good morning again. And it's a great pleasure that, I'm just checking, can you all hear me okay?
Yes, Nafi, good morning, we can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Nafi Chinery, and the West Africa Regional Manager for NRGI. I'm based in Accra. I oversee Ghana and Nigeria programs. It's a great pleasure that I welcome you to the launch of the latest edition of the Resource Governance Index, the 2021 RGI report on Ghana's mining and oil and gas sectors. As most of you are aware, the RGI is a flagship project of NRGI and covers 18 countries across 4 continents. The RGI is a robust evidence-based tool and that allows different stakeholders to understand how well their countries are performing on resource governance. It also provides credible data to support government to formulate appropriate policies and implement actions required to improve the sector. In the last decade, Ghana has chalked modest progress in extractive governance. There have been several policies and regulations to support this process. In a short while, my colleague Nasir Alfa Mohammed will be presenting the 2021 RGI. He will be looking at the assessment of Ghana's mining, oil, and gas sector. In his presentation, he will also share how we arrived at these scores and present some recommendations to government for further improving the sector. We've also got a group of fantastic panelists here who will give their brief reaction to the assessment and also help us get the discussion started. We also have you, our panelists, joining in the discussion. We hope that we are going to have a participatory and successful launch. I think that I would stop here and then quickly go over the program that we have for today. There are a few changes to the program, but it's not going to change the flow of the event. And so starting at 10, and we are hoping to end at 12 noon. Without much ado, I would like to go straight to introduce our guest speaker. We had planned for Dr. KK Sarpong, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC, to be our guest speaker for the day and also help us with the launch. Unfortunately, Dr. Sarpong, who is also the chair of the new petroleum producers group, is unable to join us this morning due to an agent's national assignment. And so instead we'd have Mr. Benjamin Akolache. Mr. Benjamin, thank you for accepting to step in at this moment. Mr. Akolache is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer in charge of Finance and Administration at the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation. And so he would be presenting Dr. KK Sarpong's message to us. At this point, Ms. Akolache, welcome, and I'd like to hand over to you to take over the space. If you can please turn on your video so that colleagues here can see you. Thank you very much.
Good morning to you all. I'm grateful to be given this opportunity to be in the stead of Dr. KK Sarpong. I will go straight to deliver his keynote address on the theme, the role of resource governance index in improving resource governance in Ghana, the case of the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation. The West Africa Regional Manager, Anglophone of the Natural Resource Governance Institute, other representatives of the institute here present, representatives of ministries and government agencies, representatives of ministries of government agencies, envoys from the donor community, captains of the mining and oil and gas industries, representatives of civil society organizations, friends of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me and the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation to participate in the important forum that will launch the Natural Resource Governance Institute's flagship indicator, the Resource Governance Index. I'm particularly grateful for the opportunity to deliver the keynote address this morning. Let me begin by acknowledging and commending the Natural Resource Governance Institute for the unique role it has played over the years in partnering government actors and key agents of change to strengthen extractive governance in Ghana and elsewhere. Since 2017, when I assumed office as CEO of GNPC, Natural Resource Governance Institute has consistently engaged the corporation on several governance issues, including a recent engagement in August 2020 on the GNPC We Want program. And prior to that, a roundtable discussion in December 2019 with senior management and staff of GNPC on the corporation's evolving strategy. The partnership we have had with Natural Resource Governance Institute has so far been exemplary at best, and we commend the Institute for its commitment to supporting GNPC and other agencies of government to achieve sustainable and inclusive development of the country's extractive resources. From my briefing, I know that today's launch will be the third edition of the Resource Governance Institute. The first and second having been launched in 2013 and 2017 respectively. In all three indexes, Natural Resource Governance Institute sought to measure the quality of governance in the oil and gas and mining sectors. In the last two indexes, Natural Resource Governance Institute particularly measured the degree to which resources are managed in an accountable and transparent manner using three index components: value realization, revenue management, and enabling environments. A cursory review of Ghana's Resource Governance Index performance shows that the country has since 2013 improved its aggregate components and sub-component scores across both oil and gas and mining sectors. In line with this measurement criteria, GNPC has indeed made great strides over the years. By way of illustration, out of 52 national oil companies assessed in 2017 using the Resource Governance Index, GNPC emerged as the best governed national oil company in sub-Saharan Africa and the fifth best governed national oil company globally. In the broader assessment of state-owned enterprises, including mining state-owned enterprises, GNPC ranked 8th best state-owned enterprise globally out of 74 state-owned enterprises assessed in the 2017 Resource Governance Index. The index attributed this performance to a number of factors, including the fiscal regulations on transfers between GNPC and government established in the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, disclosure of these transfers, parliamentary and audit oversight requirements, and disclosure of information on subsidiaries and joint venture partnerships. I have been reliably informed that the corporation's performance in the 2021 Resource Governance Index, which we are about to launch, has further improved. Madam Chair, it is from this background that I find the theme, role of the Resource Governance Index in improving resource governance in Ghana, the case of the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, appropriate. Madam Chair, inherent in the Resource Governance Index model is a greater value for improved resource governance. Natural Resource Governance institutes commitment to periodic analysis and publication of accurate data on resource governance globally through the Resource Governance Index is a powerful oversight mechanism over duty bearers to deliver on their mandate. We at GNPC have come to appreciate that role and have been working assiduously over the years to improve our corporate governance and deliver on our core mandate. GNPC was established as a strategic commercial vehicle for state participation in the oil and gas industry. Its object is to undertake the exploration, production, and disposal of petroleum, GNPC Act 1983, PNC Law 64. The thematic areas of GNPC's medium-term strategy are as follows: work towards increasing reserves and urgently optimizing production, achieving financial independence, building capacity and raising standards, fostering a strong organizational culture, strengthening stakeholder relations. In the past 20 years, the corporation has provided key technical and commercial inputs in the industry, leading to a commercial oil and gas discovery in 2007, and the subsequent development of the world-class Jubilee field, which launched Ghana into a net exporter of oil. In addition to the Jubilee field, the 10 and Sankofa G-Dami fields commenced commercial oil and gas production in 2016 and 2017, respectively. Currently, Ghana produces an average of 150,000 barrels of oil per day and exports 300 million standard cubic feet of natural gas per day, mostly for power generation. The corporation has contributed significantly to de-risking the national basins through data acquisition and processing. This has attracted substantial foreign direct investments through the signing of 18 petroleum agreements. Extensive exploration has led to significant discoveries, contributing to the nation's growing hydrocarbon reserves, estimated to be over 1,200 million barrels of oil equivalent as at the end of December 2020. GNPC has played a lead role towards the commercialization of indigenous gas resources through the funding of key infrastructure, including pipelines and a gas processing plant. This has enabled the utilization of gas for power generation, impacting significantly on economic development and environmental sustainability. GNPC is currently undertaking sole petroleum operations in the Voltairean Basin onshore and the Block 1 offshore, in line with the corporation's operatorship agenda and core mandate. This will unlock the hydrocarbon potential of Ghana's onshore basin and develop GNPC's operatorship capacities. In line with our energy transition, GNPC is fully aware of the energy transition and its inherent consequence on our operations. As a national oil company of Ghana, GNPC's medium-term strategy is to accelerate aggressive exploration and production to maximize near-term returns while evaluating prospects for diversification into renewables empower in the long term as much as avoid stranded assets. Madam Chair, although GNPC performed creditably in the 2017 Resource Governance Index, the assessment faulted the corporation on two operational issues: spending on non-commercial activities and the absence of regulations or transparency around commodity sales. According to the 2017 Resource Governance Index, these factors accounted for GNPC scoring 15 points less than Chile's Codelco Corporación Nacional de Cobre de Chile, the best state-owned enterprise performer in the index. How has GNPC remedied this since 2017? What other measures has GNPC been taking to improve its corporate governance since 2017? And how might GNPC hope these measures will impact the 2021 scores? Although we'll be sharing the relevant data with you ahead of the launch, the idea here is to self-introspect on how this aspect of 2017 assessment influenced GNPC's actions since then. Madam Chair, in the area of non-publication of audited financial statements in 2019, annual reports 2016, GNPC recognizes the importance of transparency as a key plank in the governance framework. To this end, the corporation since its establishment has made significant strides towards deepening transparency and accountability to oversight and regulatory authorities, and ultimately to the people of Ghana through submission of annual work program to Parliament for approval, submission of periodic reports to various agencies, that is State Interest and Governance Authority, SIGA, Ministry of Energy, Parliament, PIAC, Public Interest and Accountability Committee, that's PIAC, Ministry of Finance, among others. We've done media and annual review of work program performance by SIGA, MOE, Parliament, engagement with broad range of civil society organizations, including Natural Resource Governance Institute, ASEP, etc., the media and other stakeholder groups, publication of audited financial statements and annual reports, among others. Madam Chair, in the area of corporate social responsibility, our objective is to generate long-term economic benefits to the corporation and also use that as a business driver rather than as a cost center. The benefits to the organization, the production enclave of GNPC should feel that they are benefiting directly from the oil and gas resources being produced. We also need to acquire social licenses to operate. That is the essence of our corporate social responsibility that we have been embarking on. In the area of transparency around commodity sales, the corporation has taken several steps in the last 4 years to ensure greater transparency of its trades. Several initiatives are in place in collaboration with the EITI, OECD, GOGIG, PIAC, and your good self, Natural Resource Governance Index. Since 2017, GNPC has been an active member of the EITI International Working Group on Commodity Trading, responsible for developing reporting templates and guidance note 26, reporting on fair trades in oil in fulfillment of EITI requirements 4.2. In 2020, the working group developed reporting guidelines for buying companies. These guidelines are for use by companies buying oil, gas, and minerals from governments to inform their disclosures on payments to governments in their own company reports. The aim is to ensure the consistent disclosure of payments to state-owned enterprises where the commodities are being sold on behalf of the states. Ghana EITI undertook a pilot study on Ghana's first trade in 2018. The report highlighted that GNPC has a pre-qualification and buyer selection process with clear evaluation criteria, including local contents. However, there was room for improving the process to eliminate any subjectivity. There was also the need to disclose beneficial ownership data of the buying companies. A second Ghana Community Trading Report is expected to be released sometime this year. GNPC published its trades from 2015 to 2019 on its website in 2020. The 2020 trades will be published by August this year. We have engaged with Natural Resource Governance Institute to support the development of a visualization tool to enable stakeholders visualize and analyze the data with ease. In 2019, the corporation, in collaboration with PIAC and GOGIG, engaged stakeholders in a dialogue on crude oil and gas marketing in Ghana. We intend to have more of such engagements in the future. The more informed our stakeholders and the public are, the better the discourse on the activities of the corporation to fulfill its mandates. GNPC actively participates in the activities of OECD Development Center on Natural Resources. It is a member of the working group developing guidelines for buyer selection process. The corporation also engages in the OECD policy dialogue on natural resources-based development. Madam Chair, these and other activities are the corporation's efforts to ensure transparency, not just of its community sales, but also its governance structure. We envisage EITI's mainstreaming and systematic disclosure of data will go a long way to ensure greater transparency, data availability, and ease of accessibility in the coming years. We look forward to further collaboration with yourselves to achieve some of our plans in the pipeline. In conclusion, Madam Chair, on behalf of GNPC and on my own behalf, I wish to express our sincere appreciation to Natural Resource Governance Institute and its partners for the opportunity offered me as a speaker on this August forum. I also wish to express my gratitude to you, distinguished participants, for your time. It is my hope that the discussions that will ensue after the announcement of the 2021 Resource Governance Index results will prove useful and will further enrich and strengthen future resource governance index research. I thank you all for your kind attention and wish the Assembly a very productive discussion, as well as a successful launch of the 2021 Resource Governance Index. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kovachev, for delivering that message and also providing further insight into the future plans of GNPC. We are particularly excited to note that you have plans around energy transition and how to navigate some of these processes. You have also noted that you are committed to ensuring further transparency within GNPC, particularly on disclosure on its financial dealings. And so we as oversight actors and civil society, we would be taking you on some of the commitments that you have made here this morning. I hope that you would stay on with us and help us launch the report at, I think, at 11:50. We'll be pleased to have you stay on to do that as originally planned to do with Dr. Keke Sarpong. On that note, I will just move on straight to the next item on our agenda, which is the presentation of the 2021 RGI results, the main findings and recommendations from government by my colleague, Nasir Alfa Mohammed. Nasir sits with me in the Ghana office. He is our Ghana Policy Advocacy Officer. And he actually led the process with our independent researcher to gather the data. So now, if you are on, can you please share your screen? And participants, please note that we would give you opportunity to raise few questions. We'll spend just a few minutes to look at some of the questions, so pay attention. You can use the chat box. If you have questions, you can throw them in. We will pick them up and then share after Nasir's presentation. There is also the raise hand button that you can click. And if you have questions, then use that to ask your question. I'm hoping that we'll have a participatory session. And so please note your questions and let's give Nasir the opportunity to present to us the findings and how we arrived at some of the scores. Thank you very much. Nasir, over to you now.
Thank you very much, Nafi, for the opportunity. And thank you, the representative of GNPC, for all the wonderful thoughts that you've put before us, that you have been doing since the last RGI results were published in 2017. Hopefully, we will collaborate with you going forward. This would be the agenda for this presentation. We'll seek to understand what the 2021 Resource Governance Index is all about. Then we shall follow that with a methodology and the calculation processes of the RGI. We shall then have a summary of the RGI results, and we then will delve into the details of both the mining and the oil and gas assessments. And then we shall then proffer our recommendations. And if there are questions and answers, we will take them. So then we move to the methodology proper. And here we start with the roadmap that we used in arriving at the Resource Governance Index for 2021. So you would all remember that in 2017, NRGI released the 2017 Resource Governance Index. Since then, we have been using the RGI results for 2017 for stakeholder engagement in 2018, throughout 2017 itself, from the time that we launched the results, through into 2018, then into 2019. And then this 2020, we started the new research all together, trying to put together, assess the governance structures within the oil and gas and mining sectors in the country. So it was in 2020 that we did the research and assessment of the new edition of the RGI. So even though you may have seen that the RGI that we are about to launch is 2021 RGI, the time frame within which the assessment took place is especially between 2019 and 2020. But of course, taking into consideration the entire period since the last RGI results were published in 2017. But the focus has been up to the 31st of December 2020. Having said that, we shall then move to the next slide. And this slide is actually the most important slide in terms of methodology, because it outlines the steps involved that NRGI took in arriving at our calculations, our results, for purposes of launching the 2021 RGI. And you would see here that as a first step, what we do is to create a questionnaire which consists of several varieties of questions that straddles across the two important components, value realization and revenue management. That is where we normally will start from. And having done that, we then go in and ensure that we get the most knowledgeable or some of the most knowledgeable experts in the various countries that we assess. And once we get those experts from the national perspective, who will give us the national perspective, NRGI collates and assesses the quality of all the collected data that we usually will get from these, our experts. Then we will translate the raw data that we get from our experts into scores for the two bespoke components of the RGI, value realization and revenue management. And having done that, NRGI will usually collect additional data to capture the country's enabling environment, which is the broader institutional governance and transparency context. But this broader institutional governance, or the broader data that we usually will collect, are more often than not coming from NRGI per se. What we'll do is to assess other equally important indexes that are being measured by institutions like the World Bank, and other international organizations. NRGI then calculates the index using primary and the secondary data that we collect. We then analyze the results and generate our key findings. And then we publish the results on a rolling basis as we are about to do it. So you realize that for purposes of the 2021 RGI, in mid-2020, that's in the middle of 2020, we selected our independent researchers and peer reviewers across all the countries that the 2021 RGI covers. And in Ghana, we did same. And one of our own was selected. In August 2020 through to March 2021, our researchers answered the questionnaire, providing supporting documentation for all of the answers, supporting documentation in terms of laws and regulations, supporting documentation in terms of important policy statements made by relevant government actors. And for all of the assessments, the time period assessed, as I indicated, is for 2019 and 2020. Now, between March and May 2021, NRGI thematic experts, as well as our Ghana experts and RGI team, we reviewed all the questions, finalized the answers, and calculated and analyzed all of the scores. Now, I indicated that when we are publishing or we are launching and publishing the results, we usually do so on a rolling basis. And since we completed all of our analysis, we have done so for countries like Guinea, for Peru, for Mongolia, for Qatar, for Tanzania, and Guyana. And those are about 7 countries that we have already launched and published the results. Ghana is the 8th in line for the 2021 results that we are about to publish. But what does the RGI actually measure? It is important for us to have an understanding of that. When you look critically, what the RGI actually measures is observable public information. That is what we measure. We assess what is available publicly, not just available, but what is publicly available. So it's not just the issue of the fact that something is available. It must be publicly accessible by all of the actors in the industry for us to take it into consideration. In actual fact, what we don't measure are the policy outcomes. We don't measure context, for example. And for this reason, the RGI is descriptive in character rather than prescriptive. We don't measure the quality of the procedures. What we do measure is the existence of rules, of laws, of policies, and actual practices related to disclosure of information, transparency, and oversight. Now, it is important also to understand at this juncture that if a country doesn't have an institution which is supposed to be measured under our RGI, we don't assess the country for that institution, and we don't also penalize the country for the non-existence of that institution or just for the fact that we don't assess it. So all of our non-assessed issues do not count towards the averages that we arrive at the end of the day. So, and it is important, for us to put this in context so that people understand that at the end of the day, the fact that an institution is not assessed does not count towards the assessment or averages. Now, how do we do the calculations? As we indicated, the RGI measures the performance of the various countries that we assess based on three components: value realization, revenue management, and enabling environment. Of these three, the two most important and resource-concentrated components are the value realization and the revenue management. Those are what goes to the core of resource management in a given country. Under value realization, we try to measure licensing, the taxation regime, the local impact, and the state-owned enterprises. And under revenue management, we look broadly at the national budgeting scheme, the subnational resource revenue sharing, and sovereign wealth funds. However, as we indicated, these two components must be put in context, and the context in which they can be put is why we assess also the enabling environment. And under enabling environment, we want to see whether the voice and accountability subcomponent is progressive. Do we give the opportunity for freedom of speech for people to be able to criticize our governance and to hold duty bearers accountable? How is our government effective in terms of managing the resources, extractive resources of Ghana? The regulatory quality, of the various regulatory agencies. Is there rule of law in Ghana? Is corruption under control? Is there political stability and absence of violence? And to what extent do we make important documentation covering or governing the industry open for persons to be able to access these data? These are the important components that we take into consideration. Now, what we do is to ensure that the aggregate of all these three components is what constitutes the composite score that we ascribe to any of the sectors. So if you see a composite score for the oil and gas sector or for the mining sector, it is a score representing the aggregate of all these three components. So the two extractive sector subcomponents, value realization and revenue management, as you would see, cover the key policy areas that NRGI works on and which are asked about in the questionnaire. And the enabling environment is the broader governance context and a source from external data, as I've already explained. The RGI framework, which has to do with the law and the practice. Law, as we all know, is public information. If there is law which is not public to the people, or it is not public to industry actors, then it is not a meaningful law. So law is public information. The practice of the legal requirements are also public information or disclosure. So, and both of these relate directly to the extractive governance. And when you look at the components that we assess, the two components that directly relate to extractive governance is the value realization and revenue management. So we measure the law, the existence and public availability of laws and regulations in Ghana. We also measure the practice. To what extent do we have disclosure? To what extent is the enforcement regime strengthened? And to what extent do we adhere to the rules in actual practice? The difference between the average scores of all law indicators and all practice indicators is what forms the gap between written rules and enforcement, in a given country. And so the enforcement gap is an important indicator going forward when we go into the details of the assessment. And so in all of these, we assess about 21 law indicators and about 30 practice indicators. Now, this represents a summary of the scores. So for the oil and gas scores, we have 78 points of 100 points. So oil and gas this time around scored 78 of 100 points. And then we have the mining score at 69 of 100 points. And these are only the composite scores of the two sectors. So we will go into the details soon. But the composite scores, oil and gas 78 of 100 points, mining 69 of 100 points. And you can see the performance bands in the middle of this picture. So you realize that below the performance band, the least performance band is the failing, which scores under 30. So any score below 30 puts a particular country in that particular sector or that particular component or subcomponent in the failing performance band category. If your score is 30 or above and up to 44, then you fall within the poor performance band. If it is from 45 to about 59, you fall within the weak performance band. If you get from 60 to 74, you fall within the satisfactory performance band. And the highest range is between 75, of course, up to 100. And that gives you a good performance band. So holistically, the oil and gas sector performed very, very well to the extent that we fall under the highest performance band, which is the good performance band, having scored 78 of 100. The mining sector has also improved because it is now 69, which wasn't the case in 2017. Because when you look at the composite score for the mining sector in 2017, it was around 56. And at the time, it put us in the weak performance band category. So 3-4 years down the lane, we have moved about 13 points upwards into the satisfactory performance band, scoring 69. Same with the oil and gas, because in 2017, the composite score was around 67. And now it has moved from 67 to about 78, which is, close to about 11 points improvement upwards from the satisfactory performance band into the good performance band. But as is often said, the devil lies in the detail. And so we must turn to the sector details for more insight, beginning with the mining sector. I've already indicated that the composite score for the mining sector is 69, which places it in the satisfactory performance band. But we need also to look at, when assessing the mining sector, under the three components that we have already mentioned: value realization, revenue management, enabling environment. To what extent have they performed when we are using the performance bands as our key or indicators? So under value realization, which measures the quality of governance with respect to allocating extraction rights, exploration, production, environmental protection, revenue collection, and state-owned enterprises, the mining sector scored 83 of 100 points. And here, for that particular component, the mining sector, the value realization subcomponent under the mining sector has actually moved into the good performance band characterization. You come to revenue management, however, which measures the quality of national budgeting, sub-national resource revenue sharing, and the sovereign wealth funds. We realize that the mining sector remains at 54, and that is within the weak performance band, characterization. And when we come to the enabling environment, which measures the general quality of governance in the country, we are at 71 for the mining sector, which is around the satisfactory performance band. So you realize that Ghana's mining sector performance improved in value realization and revenue management from its performance in the 2017 RGI, when you check the scores. So governance of taxation and local impacts improved. But of course, contract and beneficial ownership disclosures require serious attention in the mining sector. The management of mining revenues has also improved with the adoption of new fiscal laws. But there is a serious problem when it comes to revenue sharing mechanisms, which remain poor. And as some of you would remember, this revenue sharing problems and some of the issues around revenue management was one of the reasons why civil society kept pushing for the adoption of a similar revenue management law in the mining sector, similar to that of the oil and gas sector. And it is interesting to note also that we have poor scores in open data in terms of, the extent to which open data is mirrored in the mining sector, very poor performance. And it is not only in the mining sector, but also even in the oil and gas sector, as we shall see shortly. Now, we have just talked about the key findings in the mining sector in terms of value realization, revenue management, enabling environment. But we need now to focus on the scores, the typical scores under each of those components. So for value realization and the mining, you will see that the RGI composite score for mining in 2017 was 56. And as I indicated, improved to about 69, an improvement of 12 points upwards. For value realization, in 2017, it was 61. And in 2021, we now have it at 83, meaning it has improved into the good performance band with a 22-point improvement, on that. For the licensing and the value realization, so licensing is a subcomponent under the value realization component. Licensing scored 62 in 2017 and has now only marginally improved to about 66, just a 4-point improvement. For taxation, it has improved about 10 points upwards. Local impact has improved 100 about 29 points upwards to get a 100 score, because in 2017 it was about 71. For state-owned enterprises, you will realize that we don't really have any score for state-owned enterprises and the mining, because we did not assess Ghana's state-owned enterprise in Ghana. Petroleum has not been in operation for some time, so we thought that it would be we'll be doing more of a disservice to a country that doesn't operate a state-owned enterprise in practice for the duration of the period that we are assessing. And you also remember I indicated earlier that where we have not assessed a given country for any particular institutional absence of an institution or laws or whatever, it does not contribute towards the averages that we give to that particular country. And so in respect of Ghana for state-owned enterprises in the mining sector, we assessed Petroleum, in 2017, which had a score of 41, but we are unable to assess same for the 2021, and so we did not score it at all, and it does not contribute to the averages at the end of the day. In respect of revenue management under mining, similar improvements that we have seen. So from 37 to 54, comparatively from 2017 and 2021 RGI in terms of the scores that we ascribe to those components. So the trend is a 17 points improvement. For national budgeting, a huge 34 improvement was recorded from a score of 36 in 2017 to a score of 70 in 2021. And for subnational resource revenue sharing, the score remains the same for both 2017 and 2021. And when you come to sovereign wealth funds, again, because we do not actually have sovereign wealth funds in the mining sector, the assessment was not done. Even in 2017, there was no assessment, and in 2021, there's no assessment because you can't be making assessment on matter. And it is important to stress again that the lack of assessment does not contribute, or we do not penalize Ghana for not having sovereign wealth funds and for not assessing it at all. And as we indicated, the management of the mining revenues improved with the adoption of new fiscal laws. But we have also indicated even earlier that revenue sharing mechanisms remain poor. And so the national budgeting subcomponent improved significantly, as you can see. And it is the adoption of the 2018 Fiscal Responsibility Act, which introduced concrete numerical fiscal rules governing public expenditure, preventing unrestrained spending in times of high resource revenues, that contributed to that improved performance in the national budget. Now, under revenue, under enabling environment in the mining sector, you will see marginal improvement, sometimes no improvement. We rather degenerates a bit and all of that. So you look at the component score for 2017 was 70. And in 2021, we only went up just by a margin to 71. Under voice and accountability, it even reduced by a negative. Government effectiveness remains at 0, or 60 for 2017, 60 for 2021. Regulatory quality has reduced by a margin of 2. Rule of law has reduced by a margin of 1. Control of corruption stays at the same level, 79 in 2017, 79 in 2021. Political stability and absence of violence has improved by 2 points, but open data has only also marginally improved from 27 to about 31, but still within the failing, the weak performance band, because it is 31. In 2017, it was failing, only improved by 4. Now, this picture depicts the evolution of the gap between law and practice in Ghana's mining sector. So law scores registered a 22-point increase from 61 to 83, mostly driven by the passing of the 2018 Fiscal Responsibility Act and the appointment, should I say, the establishment of the Fiscal Responsibility Council in 2019. Practice scores also improved from 53 to 68, mostly due to enhanced environmental and social impact assessment for Ghanaian gold mine projects. So we move then also to the key findings of the oil and gas. As I've already indicated, the component score is around 7,800 points, which places it in the good performance band. But when you look at the composite score is 78, but when you look at the component scores, you still have 2 of the component scores being in the good performance band, and that is the value realization and the revenue management. But the enabling environment also stays at the satisfactory performance band. Now, in terms of the value realization, going into the details, this is the outcome of it. There is improvement in almost every subcomponent and the value realization, except the taxation subcomponent, which stays at 80 in 2017 and 80 in 2021. Otherwise, every other subcomponent, there is an improvement. I mean, the highest being a 26-point improvement in the licensing regime. And we all know why this would be so, because there have been improvements in the licensing regime because of several reasons. Around licensing, we have the 2018 Petroleum Exploration and Production Regulations, 2359, introduced a whole lot of requirements that meet the criteria that we use in doing the assessment. And that is one of the reasons that accounted for this. But neither LI 2359 nor the EMP Act 919 require public disclosures of the list of areas allocated following the licensing process. And financial asset and beneficial ownership disclosures also remain inadequate despite some progress. So it is important to note this one. So even though we have improvements in the value realization component, we do have some challenges as well. For revenue management, you will see a huge improvement in the national budgeting from 36 in 2017 RGI score to about 70 in 2021 RGI score. Similarly, you will see that sovereign wealth funds moved from 93, a score of 93 in 2017 to about 100 in 2021. But that one is just about 7 points improvement. The subnational resource revenue sharing was not assessed at all because under the Petroleum Revenue Management framework, we do not get to do, we don't have rules and regulations under it that covers subnational resource revenue sharing per se. And so we do not assess that one per se. And of course, as I indicated earlier, it does not contribute to the averages. Under enabling environment, these are also the scores. We have marginal trend improvement, but sometimes even negative And so it is important. What is very key here is the open data thing again, which we have to take seriously. From a failing 27 to just a weak 31. That is not good enough. And I think it is important that going forward, Ghana will take special interest in that. Just as the oil and gas sector, we have this also represents the evolution of the gap between law and practice in Ghana. And law scores increased by 24 points, driven by the passage of the Fiscal Responsibility Act and the Fiscal Responsibility Advisory Council that was established. And similar to oil and gas, the practice calls to improve. This is a sector comparison, and we shall be sharing this slide with all of you. I've already explained most of these indicators in the previous slides, and so we move straight to the recommendations. For purposes, for the mining sector, we are recommending that the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources and the Minerals Commission should accelerate and leverage the ongoing review of the Minerals and Mining Act 2006 to strengthen the legal framework governing the mining sector. Legislation must be improved to enhance disclosures and licensing, beneficial ownership information, as well as asset declaration by public officials. We also think that relevant government agencies and ministries should adhere to open data principles in line with commitments made through Ghana's Open Government Partnership National Action Plan. The Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, the Finance Ministry, and the Minerals Commission should ensure compliance and enforcement of existing laws in the mining sector. This is because if the implementation gap widens, companies and citizens could lose faith in the legal framework. Newly passed laws such as the local content law may also not translate to improve local impacts in the mining sector if we allow the implementation gap to widen. The Prestige Sankofa Gold Limited, as and when it is rolled back to be on stream, should also understudy GNPC's transparency practices and adopt best practice approaches to state enterprise governance before resuming operations. The Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Energy, along with other key government actors, should collaborate with civil society organizations and the Ghana EITI to ensure that Ghana meets the standard requirements of the EITI. We saw GNPC indicating that they are doing their possible best to meet some of the EITI standard requirements. In respect of the oil and gas industry, the Ministry of Energy and the Petroleum Commission should push for enhanced disclosures with regard to licensing, beneficial ownership, environmental and social impact assessment, as well as asset declaration by public officials. We believe that enhanced monitoring and compliance by these state agencies in collaboration with civil society organizations are needed to ensure adherence to established laws. Various Ghanaian governmental agencies and ministries should adhere to open data principles, just as in the mining sector. They should adhere to open data principles in the oil and gas sector as well, in line with our international commitments as well as our national commitments. The Ghana National Petroleum Corporation should immediately restart the publication and disclosures of its annual reports and consolidated financial statements to ensure transparency and accountability of its management of Ghana's oil and gas resources. The Ministries of Finance and Energy, along with other key governmental actors, should collaborate with civil society organizations and the Ghana EITI to ensure that Ghana meets the standard requirements of the EITI. The Ministry of Energy and the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation must acknowledge that the energy transition will require bold policies and choices to ensure the continued viability of the oil and gas industry. All stakeholders across the Ghanaian oil and gas sector must be cognizant of the role that hydrocarbons play in the climate crisis. And we saw GNPC actually tell us that they have in their plans strategies to combat the energy transition debate, and then to consider it in all of their plans going forward. On this note, this would be the end of our presentation of the results, and if there are questions, we will be happy to take. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nasir, for the wonderful presentation. Colleagues, participants, there you have it. The results of the 2021 RGI for Ghana's mining, oil, and gas sectors. I believe that at this point, and in the interest of time, I can move straight to our panelists for their reaction on the presentation. We've seen the progress made in Ghana. The oil sector has improved. Mining has improved a little bit, but there's still areas that will require more work. It's important that we hear from our panelists what they think of the assessment that has been presented by Nasir. So I'm going over now to introduce them. They are not new to you, particularly those of us in Ghana, but for others who are joining from outside of Ghana, perhaps some kind of introduction would help you to understand the submissions that they will be making. So we were built to have Mr. Joseph Dadzie, the Deputy Chief Executive Officer for Corporate Strategy, Marketing, Gas Business, New Business and Investment Department at GNPC. Unfortunately, he's not able to meet us. He has to be with the CEO at the meeting that I talked about. And so we have Mr. Albert Akowa, Manager for Corporate Strategy at GNPC, who would be sitting in as a panelist for Joseph Dadzie here. Our second panelist, may I please request our panelists to put on their videos so that colleagues can see them. Thank you very much. I see that your videos are on. So we have Dr. Juliette Twumasi-Anokye, and Dr. Juliette is the principal consultant at Anojul, Afriyie and Co. I hope I pronounced Anojul well. And Dr. Twumasi is one of the few executive governance, legal, and regulatory experts in Ghana and Africa. She's a lawyer and an independent consultant specializing in energy, oil, and gas, local content, and business development. She's also not new to us. She's worked in both public service and private legal practice. Third panelist is Benjamin Boakye. Ben is also not new to us. Ben is an energy expert and the executive director at the Africa Center for Energy Policy. Ben has made several contributions to the extractive sector governance in Ghana and in Africa. And he's focused very much on corporate governance, institutional development, fiscal governance, contract governance, and evolution of legal framework for management of the extractive sector. Ben was also our independent RGI researcher for Ghana. And so we would be hearing from him as well. Our fourth panelist, Dr. Steve Manteaw, again, not new to all of us. Steve is a policy analyst and a campaigns coordinator at ISODE, a Ghanaian rights-based public policy research and advocacy organization. Steve is the co-chair of GATE Hearing Committee and has been very active in civil society space in various capacity, advocacy for contract disclosure, transparency, and accountability in revenue management. He is also a member of the National Steering Committee of Open Governance Partnership, was the past chair of Ghana's Public Interest and Accountability Committee. He's been doing some thinking also on how to make our resource revenue inure to the biggest benefit of Ghana. So welcome, panelists, and thank you very much for accepting to be part of this launch. I will move straight to Ben Boakye because Ben actually was the independent researcher for the RGI. So I'll move straight to Ben to give us his initial thoughts. What reactions do you have to the assessment that Nasir has just presented. What does this mean for the extractive sector governance going forward in Ghana? So if you can just briefly say that, and then we will move on to other questions that may come up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nafi. Good morning to the esteemed panelists, and good morning, Mr. Akolache, for being part of this. And thanks to NRGI. I mean, this is a rigorous process, trying to assess, the existence of rules and application of same. I think the clarity really is that I only answered questions based on available data. So I didn't dish out numbers to Ghana, and for rules that apply to many countries. I appreciate that it has to be fair, it has to be measurable across the board. And that is why you would find some of those set of questions that makes it easier to apply to other countries and also compare the performance of the country. So this RGI, as usual, measures, what rules exist and, how they have been applied without necessarily going into the contextual judgments, or if you like, subjective assessment of what the application actually really means. So I had no discretion whatsoever to say whether the application was right or was wrong, but whether it's been applied and whether the rule actually exists. So you would find measurement like I think a community impact where you see 100% score. It's really measuring whether there's rule for engaging communities and whether those rules apply. All right. Yeah, I didn't have the opportunity to discuss whether the application was right, whether communities were happy with how the rules were being applied. That discretion doesn't exist, by just measuring whether the rules exist and whether they actually apply. And I also want to say that, even if you look at the score of Ghana, it could have been higher if the state was paying attention to some minor deficiencies in the application of the rules. For example, we have in the petroleum sector, a petroleum register where all contracts are published, all right? And I'm asked, a specific question as to whether that has been updated to accommodate new contracts since 2019. And the answer is no, because the amendments that were done to some of the contracts were not published. So if those things had been published, they could be available in some databases, but they are not available on government records and the register that was established. So if that had been done, you would have seen the score go up. Again, if you look at revenue management, which really impacted the score of Ghana in the mining sector, with the passage of the Mineral Development Fund. And that essentially allocates about 20% of mineral revenues to communities and allied agencies. Well, the law exists, it is applied. How it is applied was not measured, all right? Because if you're looking at how we have applied the MDF since 2017, even though the law requires 20% allocation of revenue to the MDF, we're doing averagely about 7%, all right? So if you want to look at the specific context of the application of the law, you may have problems, but RGI doesn't measure that. You only measure whether it's been applied or not. So those are some of the questions that I would assume would come up, but that is not what the RGI is doing. It could be the work of others like us to then go into the specifics of measuring how those laws are performing. And those are the things we do all the time. Recently, we did a report really highlighting how we're doing with the MDF, for example. The Prestea-Sankofa conversation, I think it was assessed in the previous RGI, but we did not assess it this time because we look at the ERTR report and it clearly stated that the company hadn't functioned. But this is a living entity, it's still in the books of GNPC. But I wasn't really minded to assume that that is a national company in the mining sector. It's just a subsidiary of GNPC. And if you are assessing the performance of GNPC, you can't miss Prestea-Sankofa Gold, just as you would want to rope in every subsidiary of GNPC and not, set them apart, separately. I think that is where we should leave it. We don't have a national mining company. It's a subsidiary of GNPC, and how it functions is the job of GNPC to really see how it fits into its strategy and or its investment options into the future. So, I mean, beyond that, I think it's a useful process that really see how we're progressing in terms of laws and its application, but we still have to engage further on the specifics as to how those laws are actually implemented. One other thing that I also highlight is that if you check the score for revenue transparency, and what we found was that in 2017, a lot of gaps really, existed. For example, if you're measuring whether government publishes revenue, you needed to also look at other sources, not necessarily the existence of law to allow that. The national budget will always tell you how much revenue we are getting from royalties, for example, in the budget. So those numbers exist. And if we did not pay attention to them, we thought we could use that data because based on that, we can trend how much royalty is coming to the state. And then also with the application of the MDF, you know how much is supposed to go into the budget in total, which is about 80%, and then the 20% goes into the MDF. So those are the things that actually also improve the score of Ghana for 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ben, for your initial reaction. These are very useful. It tells us that there is work to do after the launch. We just shouldn't look at the numbers, but how do we use the numbers to improve the sector and also the living conditions of all of Ghanaians. Participants, please note your questions. You can drop them in the chat. And when we come to the end of the reactions from all the panelists, we go over your questions. So I would now move on to, perhaps let me just ask the follow-up question to Ben. I think that you touched on some of them, the Prestea-Sankofa mining sector, and also looked at the law and the gap between the law and the implementation of the law. However, while we saw an increase in the gap between, while both law and practice scores have increased, the gap between them has also widened from -8 to -15. You spoke a bit about what's accounting for that. However, what kind of specific recommendation would you give to government and going forward to improve on that? Are there any issues, ways that you've been reflecting on that we can share here and for government?
No, I think really it's the application of the laws. Sometimes we just gloss over some minute things that could come against the state if we were to score the country. I didn't mention that. I mean, if you check the amendments to the law, they are available. You can assess it, but where government says you can go and get the right document, it's not there. All right, so you just have to apply the law as you have to, and how it's been established, to be applied. And those are some of the minute gaps that you would want the state to really focus on and ensure that we apply the rules as we should.
Thank you very much. I'll now move on to Albert, representing GNPC. Albert, thank you very much for stepping in for Joe. And so, we saw how GNPC's performance has improved in the 2021 assessment, and this is driven by several factors, as we saw from Nasir's presentation. But also, there are some gaps in the assessment. Gaps exist around timeliness of disclosure and aspects of corporate governance. We saw GNPC scores of 50 in the corporate governance indicator. remains the same as in 2017 RGI, just because of some of the absence of published code of conduct, etc. Is this an issue for GNPC's national ambitions, and what plans do you have or have you put in place to improve on these going forward? Are there any thoughts that you would like to share with us? But also before that, the specific question, if you can also give us your reaction to Nasir's presentation briefly. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Nafi, and good morning to all the panelists and all our participants. As Nafi indicated, Mr. Joseph Dadzie is on a national assignment, so I'm standing in for him. My thought on the presentation, I think as we saw from the presenter, as far as the oil and gas industry is concerned, we've done very well, moving from 67 points in 2017 to 78 points in 2021. I think it's a good performance, and this has put us in the good performance bracket, and I think it's a good thing for Ghana, and it's a good thing for the players in the oil and gas sector. Coming back to, and I think this was as a result of improvement in the transparency areas, as has been alluded to by the presenter. I think the licensing rounds and the promulgation of the petroleum revenue management regulations and also the petroleum exploration and production regulations have also played key roles as far as improvement is concerned, and this is very good for us. Where we did not do very well in the area of the enabling environment, where I think we need to improve on the transparencies bit, I think this has really come to the attention of GNPC, and we are doing our possible best to make sure that we get all the relevant information on our website on time. I must say that we have a annual reports ready, I think 2 years ready. It's now gone to the publishers. Although we are late, we believe it's not too late. Once we get it from the publishers, I think we should be able to make it available on our website. We're also doing a lot of work to revamp the website to make sure that we're able to put key and relevant information on the website as and when possible. So for the financial statements, we believe we can do more by publishing them on time. But just that for the 2019 one, it's ready, but because we don't have our board in place, we'll need the board to sanction it for us before it can be released. So that has been done, and the moment it's released, we'll get it published on our website. So we are doing a lot of work to revamp the website, where we believe we can put a lot of relevant information on the website. So to us, where we think we are falling short in terms of how urgently we can put information on the website, management is seriously working on it, and we believe within this year, something will be done about it, and we'll have all the relevant information on the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Albert, for sharing those with us and letting us know that even before going into the details of some of the gaps within the assessment around GNPC performance, management is working on improving these areas. We look forward to reviewing the information that you put on the website and engaging with the GNPC on them going forward. I believe that participants would have some questions, follow-up questions for all the panelists and also to GNPC. I must say that we sent an invite to the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources to be on the panel. Unfortunately, we did not receive a response to that. So just to let you know that we made an effort. Unfortunately, we didn't receive any positive feedback. Perhaps they are very busy with other national assignments. And so, yeah, so I'll move on to Dr. Juliette Chimesi. Dr. Juliette, first of all, your initial reaction to Nasir's presentation. What do you make of this course? What does that tell you as an expert in the field, with your focus on legal provisions, local content, and all of that? What are your initial reactions and thoughts? And so after that, if you can look at also the quality of laws related to the oil and gas sector in Ghana, and their enforcement have both improved, from 2017 RGI. As Nasir stated, we saw the score increase by 24 points, right? But however, 2021 RGI, there's some kind of differential between the enacted rules, and the effective compliance also grew to 22 points. I mean, I think Ben spoke about some of these. However, from your experience and background and your sector expertise, what do you think accounts for this, and what recommendation would you give to government to address some of these gaps in that? And I'm speaking to you as a legal person, and also as someone who has actually championed our local content work in Ghana.
Thank you so much, Nafi, and thank you, the other esteemed panelists and participants, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this conversation. I think I'll deal with my interjection in two parts. I'll first of all talk about my reaction to the results, and also what I think we can do going forward. I think my initial reaction when I saw the figures for 2021 is, wow, I was expecting us in the oil and gas sector. I was a bit disappointed. I was expecting a higher score. So yes, we've done very well, congratulations. But I was expecting a higher score for both the oil and gas sector, as well as the mining sector. And why do I say that? Why do I say that I expect a higher score? It's because as Ghanaians, one of the things that we're very good at doing is passing laws. We're fantastic when it comes to passing laws. You name it, you have a law for it. Sometimes we are like the chefs in the kitchen with all the best ingredients. However, when the food is cooked, somehow the food ends up not being palatable. And that seems to be the problem we have in Ghana. So all the laws are in place. And like Ben rightly said, with a few little things, I'm sure we would have even scored 100% because that is not the issue. The issue really, for me, is the gap between the law and the practice. That is where it's so, when you look at the figures, it's so stark that the more laws we pass, the wider the gap becomes. And that really shouldn't be the case. It should be the more laws we pass, the narrower the gap becomes, because ideally we are passing more laws because we've been able to identify what the implementation gaps are, and we're passing new laws or new regulations to plug these gaps. But unfortunately, that is not the case. My other feeling about this is, this is fantastic, but given the very febrile environment that we find ourselves in relation to the discourse of natural resources, I'm afraid that this might be interpreted in certain quarters to mean that, oh wow, Ghana has done so well, forgetting that the index itself, as Nasir said in his presentation, measures certain things, and it doesn't measure other things. So I have a bit of a concern there, and I think Ben was picking that up, and I saw Ben furiously backpedaling how the figures had been collated, and being very sure that people understand. No, we're not checking the outcome of the policies. We're not saying that things have been effective. We only just looked, do you have this, or do you have this, or you don't have that? We didn't go down to actually drill down to see whether it's been effective or not. And I think one thing that we need to do is, when these figures go out, is to ensure that there is a health warning. And I'm sure independent oversight bodies will agree with me that it's very important that it is not misconstrued, because even though it is good news, we still have a very long way to go. We still have a long way to ensure that the food that we cook is actually palatable, not just that we have the right ingredients in the kitchen. So, it must go out by all means. We must celebrate successes. We've done very well. I looked at some of the other countries that you've been measuring, and I was horrified at some of the figures that some countries got. And you can see that Ghana, we're way ahead. We are first in class, as we are in most instances. We're teachers' pets when it comes to passing laws. But the issue is, does it do what it says on the tin, or is just a case of, let's do a tick box exercise? You want a transparency law, hey, let's pass that. Whilst we are at it, let's pass about 3 or 4 of them. You want beneficial ownership, hey, why not? We've got one. But who is actually checking whether it has actually been implemented? Who is checking to see who is accountable? In one of the slides, you mentioned Petroleum Commission should do this, GNPC should do that. Is that actually being done? Or, we give ourselves a get out of jail free card. Okay, we've done all of it. So therefore, best in class, there's nothing for you to say about us. So that is my initial, reaction to the figures. Fantastic. I was expecting 100% because we're very good at passing laws. But sadly, the gap is getting wider and wider, and something has to be done about it. In terms of the second part of your question in relation to recommendations, I think, first of all, I'll just sort of talk about 3 or 4 things as to why I think the gap persists. That irrespective of all the fantastic laws and all the consultants and whatever that we have, the gap doesn't seem to go away. And that is because, number one, there is, we don't have accountability. We need to go beyond transparency. Transparency is fantastic, but transparency without accountability actually gets you nowhere. Because yes, you can see the rules on the websites, but who is accountable when things go wrong? Who is going to hold the government accountable if the government is in breach of the various fiscal rules? Who is going to take action against them? Who is going to hold, we have GNPC on the call, who is going to hold GNPC really accountable? And what does that accountability look like? So I think that's one of the reasons why we have that. We also have a scenario where in a lot of sectors, you have just too many laws governing one particular sector. And in the mining sector, for instance, as an example, we have a plethora of laws, a plethora of institutions, all requesting certain things, all requesting varying levels of transparency, all requesting varying levels of documents and forms, and you all have you have that going on with each sector. And sometimes there's a bit of a confusion as to who is really responsible, whose feet do we hold to the fire when things go wrong. I mean, given that we're Africans, we can't forget about the power relations. Sometimes we pass these laws and we forget about the context within which we operate. We need to understand that the rules, the fact that you have rules and laws doesn't simply determine that one organization is powerful than the other and therefore they can demand a certain information. We need to look at our context that we operate in. And a lot of times we don't look at that. We don't look at the incentives when you look at the power dynamics. What is the incentive that is operating in there? And that will determine whether you look at these gaps go away or not. One thing that I also want to mention about why these gaps persist is the lack of capacity of a lot of our institutions. Most of the time we talk about capacity, but we forget about capability. So you have these fantastic laws requesting certain things to be done. Do the institutions actually have the capability to be able to do that? Do they have the wherewithal? Do they have the competence to ensure? Can they call people into account and say, look, you have provided this information. We have checked your beneficial ownership submissions, and we think that there is somebody who is politically exposed in there. We suspect that there is corruption going on, and then actually take action on the back of that information that has been provided. Unfortunately, we don't have institutions that are able to operate like that. So very finally, in terms of my recommendations that I think we need to bear in mind if we want to ensure that the gaps are closed is, first of all, as I said, and I can't say it again, is for us to have genuine accountability. So accountability for me is equal to answerability. They are, getting people to answer to things, effective scrutiny, and then, independent review, and then people actually being responsible for various actions. Competent institutions, as you know, I think that goes without saying, because at the moment, as the index has rightly pointed out, we have the power to audit state-owned enterprises, but can we really hold them accountable when things go wrong? Or is it just a case of, well, let's just get on the media and talk about it because things have gone wrong? What is the accountability mechanism? How does it look? Or do we just accept the weak and limp excuses that people trot out when they are invited before Parliament? When they're challenged by CSOs, they come out with all sorts of reasons. As we saw in the not too long ago, the licensing round and the issues that we had with it. And so far we don't really know where we're going with it, and we don't really know what that accountability mechanisms are. And then last but not the least, we need to have genuine independent oversight. We have institutions that are in court, independent regulators that are meant to independently regulate the executive in its actions in this area. These are institutions that have to be immune from political interference, political interference and the gymnastics that goes on in the political arena. These institutions that are monitoring the things that we're looking at should be, they should not be seen as an arm of the executive, but they must be able to preserve their independence whilst also working within a politically charged environment. And then lastly, the government itself must be willing to abide by the rules. There is no point, as I said, having all the fantastic ingredients if you are not really going to bother to cook. So there is no point we having all these laws and taking the exercise and being best in class and being number one if our governments, if the executive, the bodies that have been charged to comply with these laws have absolutely no intention or willingness or inclination to abide by these laws. And these are my thoughts about this exercise. So I hope it's helpful. Thank you.
Very, extremely helpful, very on point and spot on. I don't think that I would like to add anything to it, but you have just made my day in terms of how do we take this forward. So I'll leave it at that and move on, mindful of time, move on to and Steve, who has been waiting patiently for his turn. I know he has a lot to say, to share with us. Steve, first, it's your reaction to the assessment, having heard what other panelists have said, and also if you can look at the, the issue of the low score around the open data. I know that you sit on the, you sit on an OGP steering committee, and so if you can give your reflection on that. What we can do as a country to improve on that score going forward, and that's one. And on the question, and the next one is that the Ghana's oil and gas sector, features a more robust legal framework, which especially in terms of licensing, where mandatory contract disclosures are required by law, and in taxation, where the Petroleum Revenue Management Act requires the full public disclosure of all payments and receipts from oil and gas producers to the government. The mining sector legislation lacks such good governance stipulation. What is required to get government to replicate the good practice? I know that civil society, we have been, doing a lot of advocacy around this, right from the last election up until now. There hasn't been any progress. And from where you sit as the co-chair of Dadzie, what do you think can be done to replicate some of the good practices from the oil sector in the mining sector? And what role can Dadzie or other oversight actors play in this to get government to really act on improving the mining sector?
All right, thank you, Nafi. And I'll say that I share most of the sentiments expressed by the previous panelists. And to add that I am particularly thrilled that Ghana has managed to sustain not only even sustain, but improve upon its previous performance in the RGI index. For me, this actually speaks to the fact that the nearly 2 decades of reforms, which started with Ghana's accession to the EITI in 2004, and which was then complemented by the Natural Resource and Environmental Governance Program, implemented over a 10-year period from 2007 to 2016, have actually delivered the desired results. Further evidence of the progress we have made over the years is borne out by the 2016 EITI Global Conference's recognition of Ghana as a star performer in using the EITI to initiate wide-ranging policy reforms in its extractive sector. For those of us on the demand side of social accountability, the RGI does not only mirror the progress we have made, but perhaps more important governance issues that require attention. And that require attention if Ghana is to make further progress in optimizing its benefits from resource extraction. For the RGI to become more meaningful, I believe that we may want to go beyond the current box-ticking approach to focusing a bit more on the qualitative aspects. Now, an analysis of the results shows that under the value realization category of the oil and gas sector, improvement was recorded in all the indicators except in the area of taxation, which stagnated at 80%. The reason cited for the impressive performance was the passage of the general regulation, petroleum regulations, which set rules for award of licenses in the petroleum sector, including open bid rounds and beneficial ownership disclosure requirements. It is perhaps probable that if the assessment had taken into consideration the fact that in spite of the existence of legislative backing for beneficial ownership disclosure at the time of Ghana's first open bid and licensing round, the bid criteria did not require BO disclosure, the score would have been different. So this speaks to the gap between the existence of laws and institutions and the practice on the ground. And I think the NRGI has done some study that shows a widening gap between rules and their implementation. I think if the RGI could be redesigned to focus a bit more on this aspect, it will help countries make that critical transition from just the mere passage of laws into ensuring that these laws are applied to achieve the objective for which they are passed in the first place. Now, the performance on the revenue management aspect for me was a bit surprising, especially given the myriad of concerns raised by both PIAC and Gaiety on issues bordering on spending inefficiencies and outright infractions of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. For instance, the 2019 annual report of PIAC reported that for the third time, the Ministry of Finance failed to submit expenditure data for the compilation of the committee's report. The justification for the country's impressive performance in the revenue management category, which focused almost exclusively on the adoption of fiscal rules. In particular, I think the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2018 shouldn't have overlooked the PIAC and Gaiety concerns as expressed in their respective reports. Besides, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which forms the bedrock of the justification, was suspended last year, and it is not clear when it will be restored. So to give the government or the country such a high score based on a rule that has been suspended whose application have been suspended, for me, raises some concerns in terms of how we ensure that rules are not only passed, but implemented. On the particular question about open data, indeed, it appears to be the situation that national open data portals do not have, most of them do not have the extractive industry component populated. If you look at the Ghana extractive industry page on the open data portal hosted by NITA, the National Information Technology Authority, you find that the extractive industry component is still yet to be populated. There are no major challenges really, except in rare instances where fears have been expressed about the possibility of data being altered and abused. But I find some of these concerns largely unfounded. The Ghana EITI has recently opened discussions with NITA to explore ways in which the Ghana EITI could support the process of populating the extractive industry page of the Ghana Open Data Portal. And so we anticipate that in the coming months, we'll make some progress and we'll get the extractive industry page of the Open Data Portal of Ghana duly populated. In the meantime, I think it is important to recognize compensatory arrangements that allow citizens to access extractive industry data in open data formats, such as the EITI, which standard requires data to be provided in open formats and which Ghana has largely so far complied with. So you find that the data from the Ghana's commodity trading disclosures are all in open data formats. Then there was also the issue about replicating the quality of the oil governance we have in the mining sector. Compared to the previous ratings, Ghana's oil and gas sector seems to indeed have performed much better than the mining sector. And this is mainly because the oil and gas sector has benefited from the lessons drawn from mining and which have been flagged by the Ghana EITI ahead of the development of the oil and gas governance framework. Now, going back to correct those mistakes we have made in the mining sector and which serve as guidance for the development of the oil and gas governance framework is the prominent challenge that confronts us today. A process began in 2015 under the African Mining Vision Initiative, where Ghana undertook an analysis of the gap between the current state of affairs and the recommendations of the African Mining Vision. Unfortunately, very little has been done to bridge the identified gap. It normally would take intense citizens-led advocacy to get government to respond. Of course, the Ghana EITI can also make recommendations in support of citizens advocacy, but I guess this report in itself sets the agenda for citizens advocacy around the governance of our mining industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. That was quite brief and really straight to the point and touching on all the important issues. I'll now turn over to our participants who have been patiently listening. This is the time for you to raise any questions that you have, any issue that you would like for clarification. I've seen 2 questions in the chat box. I will be passing them on to Nasir and Benjamin then watching because he actually led the data gathering from the country level. But also in Steve's submissions, there were issues around the scores on revenue management with regards to the suspension of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. And so perhaps Nasir and Ben, you can respond to that and what really the RGI is looking at. So let me, if you can see, open the chat box. So there was a first question, which was, do you send a report, that is the analysis and findings from the data to government to get a response from them before you publish, or they are free to respond after it's been published? I believe this is to Nasir and Ben to respond to. And there's also a second question about, I will be grateful from Bafo. So the first one was from Robert and Diaba. The second one that I'm going to read is coming from Bafo Mankwa. He says, I will be grateful if you could explain what went into determining the control of corruption in the enabling environment session for the mining sector. So again, to the NRGI, my colleague, and also to the researcher, if you can respond to these issues and also to some of the concerns raised by Steve in his submission. Yeah.
Hello, Nafi.
Yeah, go ahead, Nafi.
All right, thank you very much. In respect of the first, which speaks to the revenue management concerns relative to the suspension of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, it is essential for participants to understand that the RGI measures or assesses the availability of laws, of regulations, of rules, not of the quality as we indicated earlier. So you see that what Dr. Steve is speaking to speaks to assessment of the quality properly so-called. Because in terms of the suspension per se, it is not sufficient, for example, to just go under, let's say, a budget presentation or take an action under a budget to suspend an activity that is required by law, and to think that that particular legal instrument or legal requirement is automatically repealed or so. So in law, the law probably is in existence, but there may be a way where the law itself gives you an opportunity to suspend it for quite some time. I mean, for good reasons, either for purposes of budgetary allocations and all that. But in order to repeal a law, it must be a legislative process as well. So for us, once the law is in existence, we take it into consideration for purposes of our assessment. And so we assess the public availability of the laws and regulations, but we understand that, of course, we take into consideration your recommendation that RGI should be looking forward to considering the qualitative assessments as well, and not just only about the availability of the law, such that we can actually influence the thinking of government actors around improving resource governance in Ghana. But in respect of this question on data, somebody asked whether the results on data, for example, was sent to government before publishing. I think when I was making my presentation, I made it clear that under the enabling environment component, all of the data we have there are not primary or direct data gathered by NRGI itself. I did indicate that those are data we source from other international actors, like the worldwide governance indicators that the World Bank usually conducts. But in respect of the open data in particular, we sourced that information from the open data inventory by the Open Data Watch, which is an international non-governmental organization with headquarters in Washington. They assess open data regimes of the various countries around the world, including that of Ghana. What we do, because our bias is in the extractive sector governance, we ensure that we collect the primary data on value realization and on revenue management. And then we source the data like open data from open data inventory. Then we standardize the scoring to match with our scoring without necessarily altering the performance of the various countries in respect of open data. But that is how we solve them. And now to your question, what is important is that the data that we source are public information. We indicated to you that we are assessing public information, not just information that is available. So if the information is available and it is sitting in government shelves, we don't assess that. What we assess is what government has put before the public, and that is what we assess. And so when we finish assessing it, the idea of going to government for any response is actually inconsequential, because then the question is, if we go to government, for example, they tell us, oh, but we have this information, we just have not yet given it to the public. Then the question is, what then are we assessing? Because we have made it clear to everybody that under our methodology, what we are assessing is what is publicly available, for actors in the industry to be able to assess. And so that speaks to that particular question. And we are okay if after launching this results, government has some reactions to certain aspects of the results. We are okay to listen to government and to partner with them going forward in finding solutions to some of the issues. Thank you.
Very much, Nasir. I'm quite mindful of the time that we are delaying a bit, but I think that you've made it quite clear. Ben, do you have anything to add very quickly?
I think essentially just to acknowledge again that the RGI can only do so much, and it's a useful exercise for us to know what laws exist and how they apply. The subjective issues can be dealt with at a national level, or maybe a look at how we can integrate a model that can work, because you're measuring many countries, right? So you're careful how subjectivity can distort the measurement of the quality of implementation of the laws. So those are discussions, and ideas could be welcome. I'm sure NRGI will welcome ideas as to how those terrains can be navigated to ensure that we can be robust at measuring how these laws actually perform in various countries. I've had those concerns, and I'm sure NRGI will know that I've told them several times that we need to improve on how we measure those as well to account for the actual situation on the ground. I understand what Steve is talking about. We all have challenges with how the law, sometimes even a question about interpretation. Somebody sees the law, he knows that black and white, it means A, B, C, D, and he says it's X, Y, Z. So those are subjective issues that we would have to, engage on. But this is what it is. We know what the RGI is for. It's measuring whether the law exists, and it can be useful. I mean, for somebody also analyzing how the law has performed. You can benchmark the RGI on the performance on the ground, how these things are happening. A question on the measurement of corruption. I think we looked at the laws and the prescriptions for transparency, disclosures, which really fight against corruption in the space, beneficial ownership, disclosure, and the rest of it. So those are the parameters that were used. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ben, for that addition. I'm quite mindful of time, but just quickly to add that the control of corruption includes data from the Africa Development Bank and the Afrobarometer as well, that NRGI rely very much on in this assessment. And there's a last question that, I don't know who would respond to that. This is from Cecilia. Cecilia is from Liberia. What is the role of CSOs in the implementation of the Africa Mining Index to begin working? So any of you can respond to that in 1 minute, so we can have the formal launch, and then people can go back to their work. Thank you. Is there any, I know Steve, Ben, and others have been working on that as well. Would you like to respond to that quickly in 1 minute?
No, it's not a process I've monitored much. Steve, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I want to come in. Yes, I guess the reference is to the African mining version and not the African mining index. And the emphasis is on how we improve the governance of our natural resources. So the name really connotes mining, but the principles are to be applied in general to all depletable extractive resources. And in terms of the governance, proposed governance framework and the role of CSOs is one of a partnership. And I think it mimics what is being done under the EITI, where government, industry, and civil society come together to look at how best to turn resource extraction into a win-win venture for all concerned. So the role specifically for CSOs would be one of monitoring and providing feedback on how the principles and the rules around resource governance is being applied, so that at least the necessary reforms can be undertaken by the respective implementing agencies.
Thank you very much, Ben. That's the last question, and then I'll just take that one, and then we close. It's on beneficial ownership disclosure, and it says it's from Jonathan Adabre. Is it key to the issue of corruption control? But here is a battle fought for many years without success. What else has to be done to make improvements in this area? Can CSOs make use of the Right to Information Act as a tool? Again, to any of you can take that question, and in 1 minute, and please.
Significant progress has been made. If you check the Registrar General's website, now you can easily get to know who owns what in the space. So the battle is not lost. Progress has been made. We need to improve on that progress. We have the laws, particularly in the oil sector, which demands beneficial ownership disclosure at the level of the contract. And we didn't see that happen with the last licensing round. So we flagged that, and hopefully the next one, they should apply that. So significant progress has been made.
And thank you all very much for your fantastic submissions and reactions.
And Nafi, just to inform Jonathan that there are consequences for Ghana for non-implementation of BO. So there is no way the battle can be lost. It's in fact the BO, the non-existence of the BO regime was one of the reasons Ghana was actually suspended or was sanctioned under the Financial Action Task Force initiative. And so now that we have a regime in place, first, it's been legislated, the data capture templates have been developed, and currently the Registrar General is in the process of collecting BO data, and there are strict timelines for this. And so the battle is not lost, as he suggests.
Thank you very much. Great panel, as always. You never go wrong with any of them. I think that at this point, I would turn over to Mr. Benjamin Akolache to help us launch the RGI formally. I'm going to share, just a cover. Do you all see that on the screen? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so Mr. Benjamin Akolache, thank you very much for indulging us for a few more minutes. My apologies. And now, yeah, hand over to you to help us to do the formal launch.
Very well. Good afternoon to
We can't hear.
I think his video froze for a while.
If anybody from GNPC is on the call and can pass on the message to Mr. Akolache, that would be helpful. We can hear you. Perhaps it has to do with your session or something. Can somebody?
Okay. Very well, very well. I've realized that. Sorry. Good afternoon, participants. We have come very far today, and my duty is simply officially launch this report. But before I do that, figuring from the results from 2021 as compared to 2017 resource governance index, there have been a general improvement across board with some few areas that we experienced some lower scores. I think there will be continuous improvement in whatever we do. So we take it all upon ourselves as key stakeholders to pursue that agenda. We also realize that we have most of the laws in place, but the issue is about compliance. So we take compliance as a serious matter going forward. And also having to act timeously in whatever we are supposed to do. We believe if we are able to do that, we'll go a long way to achieve the goals that we set for ourselves. Accountability issues too were raised, and we believe that if we're able to abide by whatever laws have been done, we'll go very far. The will of governments to abide by the laws also raised. And lastly, I think the beneficial ownership issues were raised and thoroughly discussed. We'll go back and see how best we assist the stakeholders and others to ensure that we achieve the objective of this beneficial ownership matter that goes worldwide. On this note, without much ado, on behalf of everybody and on behalf of GNPC, the keynote speaker, Dr. Keke Sarpong, and on my own behalf, I declare this Resource Governance Index Report 2021 officially and duly launched. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mr. Benjamin Akolache. Thank you very much to all our participants. Mr. Benjamin Akolache, please pass on our gratitude to Dr. Keke Sarpong. We would have loved to have him here, but you equally did a great job. And thank you very much. To all the participants, we are grateful. This is not an event, it is a process. And our aim is to use the assessment and the finding and the data in the report to continue to engage governments and oversight actors to ensure that we improve on the sector. Thank you. And on this note, I formally bring the discussion and the launch and to a close. Thank you.